Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being the show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Stargirl, a great premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I think it's really interesting, that was a very, awesome, action-packed opening and everything. It's so interesting in the grand scheme of things, too, because it's at Crisis on Infinite Earths saw the birth of the Justice League. So now it's interesting to see, obviously here we're starting off with the Justice Society of America faltering. Granted, this is two different Earths. That's Earth Prime. This is, based on Crisis on Infinite Earths stating that this is all on Earth 2. So, which begs the question, since there's technically no Earth 2 yet, it's interesting how the multiverse is going to work, because it's going to pop up. It's this world existed the entire time, even though it technically didn't, because it's just crazy when you actually break it down and think about it too much like that. But regardless, I'm going on a tangent and all that. The fact of the matter is, we have Luke Wilson playing Pat, aka Stripesy, showing up, and the JSA is basically getting her asses handed to him. We see Wildcat get taken down. I was like, holy crap, because that's our first introduction to a full-blown Wildcat, because you get introduced to the character in Arrow, but it never became more than that, because that's the dude that was training Laurel back in the day. That dude, I know he becomes Wildcat. I think that was even one of his code names, or a name he gave himself, but that's about it. So it's interesting to see him there. Even at one point, we see Jay Garrett's helmet. I was like, oh, so Jay Garrett's dead in this world. But obviously, I'm not the only villain I was familiar with. I was because I didn't know he was a part of this until I randomly saw some promotion material. I was like, wait, Solomon Grundy's a part of this shit? Hell yeah. I'm not that well versed in the character. Only reason why I know about him is because of the Justice League cartoon animated series. I know he's popped up in some video games, like the first Injustice game and stuff like that. I want to say I know he's in Arkham Asylum. I don't know if he's in any other Arkham games. But obviously, I got to know him also because of, Butch, aka Solomon Grundy, in the TV show Gotham. So it's interesting. But nevertheless, there's also that character Icicle. I'm like, is that supposed to be the equivalency on this Earth to Caitlyn's dad? God, I don't remember what his name was. I'm fine with you totally correcting me. Once again, I'm not well versed in the comic books and stuff like that, and I don't remember what her dad's name was. Obviously, Caitlyn's, it's Killer Frost, but I'm wondering what her dad's alter ego was called. I don't remember. But I was wondering if that's who he's supposed to be, an Earth 2 equivalent. I mean, my mind immediately goes there, because I'm there's only a handful of ice-powered villains, full-blown metahuman powers like that, but nevertheless, there was also Brainwave, who was kind of the psychic of the group. It was just interesting. And also seeing Starman, played by Joe McHale, I was like, dude, that's so dope. Kicking ass like that. I really appreciate this show also, talent show, you showcases a lot more later on too, but just how you fight with that staff and everything. It's actually pretty freaking sick. It's such a unique situation, because it's amongst the heroes, especially amongst the Arrowverse, the only people who used kind of powered up weapons, or just was Green Arrow. I mean, granted, it was just a regular bow that he was just super good at, but it's still kind of a thing of you don't see too many heroes in the Arrowverse fighting with special or enchanted weapons. It's usually I just use whatever I can find, or I just have the natural powers that they may see it. For it to be translated into a weapon, it's just such an interesting thing. A nice little introduction, I thought it was kind of neat, and it seems I think this is probably a good tone setter for the show too. It's it has a sad yet funny intro, even though it's oh, this is a sad moment because Starman's dying, he's joking because Pat's oh, I'll take, he's no, I didn't mean you're totally not. He's you're dead, and I'm you're literally dying. Your final words are basically telling Pat, yeah, you're cool, you're my best friend, you're my buddy, dude, you're my partner, but no, you're someone else needs to take the staff, not you. Definitely not you. I'm if I was Pat, I would take some damn offense to that. I was oh, that's harsh. But the Justice Society of America is dealt with. I didn't know, I was wait, that car transforms into it can turn into a hover vehicle and everything. I was holy crap, I didn't know that. I thought that was really interesting. Kind of immediately, I know, crossing streams, Marvel and DC, sorry, but it reminds me of the car that God, what is it's Coulson's car in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It has a name. I can't remember what it is though. But never, it kind of reminded me of that, especially because it's kind of a classic car in the same vein as well. But at the same time, like we see a young Courtney. Her dad hadn't come home. Also, I did not know her mom was played by Amy Smart, or I did, but I completely forgot about it till I saw her. I was like, oh my god, right, your mom. Because the only reason why I found that out was because, like, obviously, fairly recently, the actress who plays Courtney, aka Stargirl, Brett Bassinger, she was on Fat Man Beyond, and she was talking to Kev and Mark about like having Amy Smart play her mom. I thought that was so interesting. I also forgot that Luke Wilson played her stepdad, because I was like, oh no. And then like she's like, yeah, it's because of him we're moving. I was like, oh right. He's not her dad. He's her stepdad. So. But we like all these years later, she has to move, and I think it's a neat, like, interesting approach. Like, cause I always think it's interesting when you blend like basically a coming of age story with like a superhero show. Like, because there's not too many examples of that necessarily, so it's just interesting because I think this is like our first real example of that in the DC shows, at least to my knowledge. I'm not probably really thinking of one, but like most heroes end up being adults, so it's interesting to see someone who's a teenager kind of rising up to become a hero. Like Roni in the first episode, but like I said, I just think that's kind of an interesting thing. It is kind of sad, like no matter what Pat does, like it's not good enough because Courtney, like he's like, oh yeah, you need help with that? Don't worry, I'll get the rest of the boxes and stuff like that. And we kind of learn, like, because obviously they're moving like to Nebraska, and obviously for Courtney it's like, it's because she ended up picking up that present. It's like that she had from when she was like 5 years old, that her dad, like, it was a gift from her dad. She wanted to see her dad, but he didn't show up, and so for her, she like never actually opened it. So that must be like a big plot point of like finally opening that and finding out what the hell is actually on the inside. But obviously they're moving to this place called Blue Valley, Nebraska. And it's that awkward thing of like, oh, everyone's like so polite, and it's just like even his son Mike is like, why is so many people saying hey? It's like, yeah, that's the place. That's people just being friendly. And him calling his dad Pat, he's like, that's dad to you. It's like, why does Courtney get to call you Pat? She's like, don't drag me into this. So it's kind of obviously like an adjustment period, because it seems like this is still relatively new, because like Pat and Courtney's mom only got together like in the past like 2 years. So because she said she came back to Blue Valley because it was like, wasn't it like because her mom like selling her mom's house or something like that. So it's still a relatively new situation, new dynamic they found themselves in. It seems like Mike doesn't really seem like he really cares too much. I mean, granted, we haven't spent enough time, but it seems like the one it bothers the most is Courtney, so because I think for her it's almost like, oh, you're trying to replace, you're like, because what ends up pissing her off is because like Pat tries too hard, because when they're driving and everything, he talks about the fact is his dad was in the military. Because of that, like, oh, it's like, yeah, I moved down around a lot, and because it was back in the day, I never actually had an opportunity to catch up with it. I never was able to keep up with my friends like you are able through text and stuff like that. And he talks about the fact is that he wanted to be in the same field as like his dad because he thought they could spend more time together. But he said it was almost like this somber like line of like, yeah, but it didn't work out like that. And Courtney almost kind of perks up a little bit, because I think hearing him talk about his dad just probably made her think more about her dad and everything. But she was just kind of like, yeah, I'm busy talking to someone right now. So, and he's like, you have like a super great or amazing day, and just like because he's trying too hard, and just it annoys her. First day at school and everything. It's like, oh, she she wants to try out for gymnastics because she thought like that was they had a gymnastics situation at the school, but it turns out they don't. And the lady's like, oh, why don't you try it for cheerleading? It's just like gymnastics, and the boys love cheerleaders. And then like Courtney just has a face like, what? And then like that's her forever her school ID tag. Then she meets, Cindy and Jenny, and it's just like, oh yeah, she's like, I want you to join in cheerleaders, yeah, like it's like, why? It's because I want you to be my second. Jenny's like, wait, I thought I was your second. It's like, yeah, but you can't do the split. She's like, but I'm working on it. And then later on when they're walking away, she's like, but I'm still your number two, right? I was like, I love that, already setting up that dynamic. It's like, I guess she's already setting up our queen bee, I guess, at the high school. And because because obviously she was trying to be like, oh yeah, like I don't want to join the squad. She's like, whoa, so you don't want to hang out? No, she's like, that's not what I meant. It's like, okay, then cool, I'll text you. It's like, how do you, oh, I know your name. Oh, let me give you my number. Oh, I already got your number. It's like, how do you do? So it must mean like her mom or dad or whoever must be like principal or something. Like she must have some like connect like that for her to have access to information. Like, how the hell do you just have my number? I literally just came to this school. Then she's in the lunchroom and everything. She's like, I'm looking for a seat, and the lady's like, oh yeah, there's one over there, and she's smiling, and then her smile goes on. I was like, what the hell is that about? And it's like, oh, this is the loser seat. So I'm like, what? So it's like, who the hell was that lady pointing you in this direction? But then one of the dudes comes over and he's starting shit. Side note, isn't that the actor who, I can't remember his character name, but in the show Rectify, isn't that the actor who plays the youngest son? It might not be the actor. He might look a little similar. I meant to note this too. Like, I'm sorry, I'm a little over the place. There was a freaking, the trucks is called Action Movers. And I was like, oh, I mean, especially the way it was stylized and everything. I was like, is that supposed to be like a wink and nod to like, oh, Action Comics? I was assuming that's what that was supposed to be. I was like, not unless I'm reading too much into that. Just like anytime you see the number 52 now, like because now I associate with like, oh, I get it now because I've become a little more knowledgeable about DC stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, 52. I totally get it now. Like the new 52 and stuff, like 52 having a significance. So like anytime I see the number, I'm like, oh, I get it now. Before I would have went over my head like the significance of it. Regardless, it's kind of that thing of like, I don't know if I'm reading too much into it. Maybe it was meant to be kind of like a slight wink and nod to Action Comics. Maybe it wasn't, like I said. But nevertheless, home dude tried to take her phone. Courtney kind of pushed him, and it turns out that's Cindy's boyfriend. So it's like, oh, you're already on her shit list now. Then you get sent to detention where you're with one of the dudes who was at the loser table, and he's taking a knife to like his table, and kind of a complicated mess of a first day and everything. Obviously, she stormed off telling Pat, like, oh, you're not my dad. He's like, oh, yeah, it's my fault. I'm trying too hard. She's like, no, you're trying just hard enough. And she goes to the basement, and she ends up finding some of Pat's stuff that he... Because what was interesting, though, is because like when they were moving, she noticed that there were boxes saying auto parts. And you could tell she was looking almost like, what's that about? And she finds stuff of Pat's, and then she sees like, oh, there's a picture of him with fish, but then she moves it, and it's like, oh, it's a picture of the Justice Society of America. I know maybe a handful. We see a Jay Garrett, we see a Hawkman and Hawk Girl. I feel like there was someone else I might have recognized. Once again, I'm not, especially the Justice Society of America. I am very loosely like aware of who they are. Only slight association I have with them is them from season 2 of Legends of Tomorrow. That's it. Like, so that's my only correlation to them. So regardless, and I think it's kind of cool too that it's like, it's not like it's a well-kept secret. It's like, because superheroes, I guess it's just kind of a wide enough thing, because it's like, she's like later on, it's like, oh, I know who the Justice Society of America is. I know who the Starman and everything is. So it's like, it's not like, oh, like, who is this? What's this all about? It's like, oh, like she went into this already having some idea. And I think that's kind of neat. I mean, it's like when you have superheroes around, you kind of know. But I guess it's like, because even she was like, oh yeah, like they disappeared, but Pat had to be like, no, they didn't disappear, they died. Because obviously like she gets the staff out, and I didn't know this was an element of the series, and I think the trailers did a good job hiding this. I mean, maybe there's some trailers that showed it, but the one I saw didn't showcase this too much. Is the fact is that the staff is basically is a sentient being. Like, it has a mind of its own, and it just kind of does its own thing. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And just like the fact is, it stayed in one place, and she had to like tug to pull, and I was like, oh, that's so dope. And it's pulling her in one direction. And then like, and I think that's such a neat thing because of her gymnastic training and like her testing with it, like using it like a bar to swing herself, and just like kind of like, it was actually pretty dope. I was like, that's so sick. So that's going to be nicely like flowed into how she fights, I'm sure, like taking her gymnastics training combined with the staff kind of pushing her in the right direction. And I was like, that's actually pretty sick. And obviously her like, she wanted to, but it just kind of did its own thing and made her fly. And she ends up going to like that drive-in movie theater, home dude and the other friends are like starting shit. She meant to go over there just flatten her tires, but it's like, oh no, like it turns into a fight situation, which is pretty badass. Like blinding them at one point. One dude just like runs straight into the staff. I'm like, it looks so sick to kind of just jump into like the whole superhero thing, even though you're still kind of a bit of an amateur at it. It was still pretty dope to see everything kind of showcase off like that, and then blowing up the car. She's like, "What did you do? I didn't want to blow the car." And it's just like the staff, someone's like talking to her and stuff like that. I'm wondering like how that whole situation will work. Like, will she be able to fully understand what the staff says like later on? Is it just kind of like I guess it's kind of like, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be like an R2D2 type of situation of like you making noise and it's like, oh, I know exactly what you're saying, or is it just going to be a thing of like it seems like it's, at least for now, seems like it's pure interpretation. Is that what are you trying to tell me? I don't get it. So going back and Pat kind of giving her a spiel about like the fact is that the staff is like a cosmic thing, which I was wondering. I was wondering if like she was like supposed to be kind of like a cosmic hero, and it turns out obviously we don't know, like we haven't dived too deeply into like the understanding like the staff and everything, so a lot of that's still kind of an enigma to us. But obviously Pat just kind of explains a little bit more, because we also see that it's not like, oh, it wasn't just when Sylvester was Starman. Like him and Pat go way back, because he ended up bringing up later on that he was a driver for their family, and the fact of the matter is someone tried to hurt his family, and so Sylvester like dressed up and then he beat them up, and eventually he got the staff and later on became Starman. So obviously he was doing this vigilante thing before he became like a superhero and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting. But what's also an interesting detail is the fact is that Courtney is thinking that Starman was her dad, because it's like, because even Pat's like, I don't get why you are able to wield the staff, but it's like it'd be too much of a coincidence. But for her, it's like it must be fate or destiny or something, like, you know. So because it's like, yeah, that same Christmas Eve that he died, it's the same Christmas Eve like her dad didn't show up, you know. And for her, it's like, yeah, he died because he never showed up because he died saving the world and everything. So it makes her think like, okay, she wants to ask her mom about it, but her mom's like, you think your dad's a great person? He only showed up like once ever since you were little. Like he showed up maybe like every Christmas until that Christmas when you were 5, and he didn't show up. Kind of saying like, you know, he abandoned us. He wasn't there for us. The only good person in our lives that was actually there, who has been there for me and for you, has been Pat. You know, so kind of saying like, ease up on Pat, like you owe him an apology and stuff like that. And I just because she's like, oh, like, because obviously even Pat's like, yeah, I didn't want to keep the secret from your mom, because that's kind of a bad thing for a relationship. But for him, it's like, you know, it's like, if it means protecting the people you care about, this is about protecting Courtney, Mike, and, you know, their mom, because it's like, people who know about this, you know, it's the superhero thing of like, once you're in danger type of situation. So. But she decides not to tell her mom, and she ends up explaining later on, like, Pat makes her mom happy. She's like, you've made her happy in a way I haven't seen her in a long time. So I don't, like, by spilling all this, telling her the truth and everything, it might take that all away from her. So I'll keep your secret as long as you stay out of my way, which I'm like, that's kind of a weird way to, he's like, stay out of your way. He's kind of like, almost like it doesn't work like that, you know, it's just, you know. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. You know, like, she's kind of an angsty teen, so it kind of fits. But, you know, it's just kind of like, you're not my dad type of situation, so you can understand where she's coming from in that regard. But still, it's interesting. I guess because in your mind, you kind of have an idea of like, you know, I mean, superheroes are just like people do. They have their own like personal issues. I mean, that's always the human aspect is always what makes superheroes fascinating, balancing being the badass superhero while also balancing that human nature as well, you know? So at the same time, we end up finding out the kid who, one of the kids, the main bully that Courtney kicked his ass, turns out he's Brainwave's kid. And he's like, wait, tell me all about the staff. It's like, okay. And he calls up, I think, Icicle. And Icicle was like, don't do anything until I get there. But he acts first, because I guess it's like, oh, it makes you wonder, was it really about your son, or is it just because, oh, you think someone else has picked up the mantle of Starman? It's like, whoever they are, I'm gonna put them down. And this, I think that presents a very unique situation too, because it's like, I mean, I think from time to time we see bad guys with family, but it's just like weird to see like a pure villain with like a kid and everything. It seems weird. I mean, and I think that's such an interesting thing they've set up for the show too, that the main antagonist is going to be, aren't they called, I think they're called the Injustice Society. I think that's their name, this group of villains. I think that's so interesting. It's a group of villains, because even amongst like, you know, aside from even just like Titans or even Doom Patrol or even any of like the CW shows in the Arrowverse, because I think even though this is on DC Universe, this still does fall into the category of being part of the Arrowverse. I mean, technically Titans, Swamp Thing, and Doom Patrol are part of the Arrowverse too, but they're just on a different Earth. So there's a whole technicality behind that. But the fact of the matter is, more often than not, it's usually one singular villain, especially your first season. For it to be like a full-blown group of enemies, I think is such an interesting thing. I mean, granted, you could say technically with Arrow, it's like, well, it's a full-blown, like, group. He had to stop the undertaking. It was mainly Merlin behind it, but there were other people too, but other people were getting killed off. But it was mainly Merlin behind it. It was kind of maybe one like person at the top of it. So it's interesting in this case for it to be like a full-blown organization. Kind of think it's interesting because obviously we had the Legion of Doom in season 2 of Legends of Tomorrow. Now they have like this Injustice Society type of situation. I think is really neat. But obviously the staff coming to her and her trying to hide it from her mom and everything, and I was like, I like that. That's you can tell that's gonna be like a quirky aspect of the show, of just being like the staff kind of doing its own thing, and you having to like distract, probably a thing of like her distracting her mom, like, hey mom, what's going on, as the staff's kind of doing its own thing. Like I think it's such an interesting element that I feel like once again we haven't really had an opportunity to really like see showcased in any DC shows, because I think this is going to present something we've never really seen before. Once again, this is also coming from someone, I've said this in other places, this is coming from someone who is not well versed in the character. I've only dabbled in actually learning about the significance of this character, like what this character actually means to Jeff Johns. I haven't dived too deep into it, but obviously I was talking about Kev and Mark on Fat Man Beyond when they were talking to Breck about this whole situation, and they brought up like, oh, what this character, like the significance of this character is, and I was like, oh, I didn't know. Like I said, this is aside from like Legends, this is like my first time really getting to know this character. So tangents and all that, but it taking her to the roof and her kind of showcasing more with it, I don't know, like I said, it's like that gymnastics aspect along with the staff is actually pretty dope. And like especially I like the way it looks like when she rides it, kind of like a witch riding a broom. I think is pretty dope. But then getting attacked by Brainwave, that's got to be the scariest thing, because all of a sudden you're like, what the hell is happening? You're getting attacked out of nowhere, and it's like, what the hell? Stuff is getting flown at me, and it's like it's so crazy to be straight up like going into it like your first day. You're going at like a supervillain. You literally just got the staff earlier today, and you're like, wait, what? What the hell's going on? You're going at this alone, like going up against a supervillain, and one that can actually get inside your head, which is very dangerous, considering like, oh, he's trying to pluck all this information out of you. Like, why are you thinking about your dad right now? Who are you? Why do you have the staff? Her being able to kind of fight back a little bit. Her kind of running away and running into Pat, who's in the robot suit, which I only knew about that because of the promo. But it's not until I took a real good look and I was like, that's the car. So the car is not only a flying car, it's also a mech. That's actually pretty dope. But yeah, I think this was kind of a very nice introduction to this series. I think that's actually, I actually like it too, that the fact of the matter is she hasn't like become officially Stargirl in the first episode. I think it's also because, well, let's not forget, this was originally like made specifically for DC Universe, so their way of kind of like going about their episodes is obviously a little different structural wise than most other CW shows. So it's just interesting that, because like other than that, like the closest thing you can think of is like Kate not being like, she put on the suit and everything, but she doesn't officially become Batwoman until like the second episode. It's kind of a similar thing. I mean, I guess you can make the argument with Oliver, but everyone else, whether it be Kara, whether it be the Legends, the Legends are a different circumstance, but even Barry, like they all kind of had their suits. Even Jeff, I mean, to be fair, he was already Black Lightning for a while, but then he just kind of came back. So it's a very unique circumstance is all I'm trying to say. But I'm very, very excited to kind of dive into the show, get to know obviously these characters, especially the villains, and kind of understand, like find out more about this cosmic staff and everything and what that's all about, and get to know Courtney and this journey to becoming Stargirl. So I'm really interested to see where all this takes us going forward into the series, but just in general, what's in store for us in the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.